Today we will explore the mystery of the soul through the myth of an ancient tale told by Plato that transcends time and invites us to reflect on our existence, our choices, and our spiritual destiny. This is not merely a mythological story, but a powerful lesson about life, death, and what may lie beyond. Are you ready to discover what the soul remembers, even when we have forgotten? Was originally from Pamphylia, an ancient region located in what is now part of southern Turkey. His name was not among the famous heroes nor the recognized sages. He was an ordinary man, just another soldier, lost in the vastness of a war whose purpose has faded with time. Yet his story would transcend centuries and borders, not because of bravery in battle, but because of what he experienced after death. Died. He fell in combat like so many others. His body lay motionless among the corpses of his comrades. After 10 days, when the bodies had begun to decay, remained intact, without the slightest sign of decomposition. He was brought to a funeral pyre to receive the final rites, but then the impossible happened. He awoke. He opened his eyes before being consigned to the flames, not with the confusion of someone returning from a dream, but with the solemnity of one who had gazed upon eternity. It was not a miraculous resurrection, but a reverse reincarnation. Had crossed into the other world and returned, not as a soul in transit, but as a witness. His soul, separated from his body, had travelled beyond the boundary between life and death, and what he brought back was not a hazy memory, but a precise and penetrating vision of the destiny of all souls. He did not speak of tunnels of light or celestial voices. His experience was deeper, a structured, rational, and moral revelation about the spiritual order of the universe. In the beyond that he described, souls did not wander aimlessly. Beheld a spiritual realm governed by justice, by cosmic harmony, by laws that transcended both gods and men. The souls arrived at a luminous meadow where the judges of the soul resided. There, their fate was decided. Some were sent to the right, ascending toward the heavens. Others descended to the left, into the earth, toward regions of purification and punishment. Was not judged. He did not drink the water of forgetfulness, nor did he choose a new life like the other souls. He was set apart, appointed to observe. His soul, in an intermediate state between matter and spirit, retained full awareness of what it witnessed. He did not take part in the cycle, but was instructed in its laws. That is why his account has a unique character. It is not a hallucination, nor a comfort for the living, but a warning, an orderly exposition of what awaits every human being beyond their final breath. Ayre's experience reveals that death is not the end of the soul, but its passage into a new dimension. There, the soul sheds all external things, the body, the name, apparent honours and guilts. Only its essence remains, its moral weight, the imprint of its free choices. Each soul carries within itself its destiny, not imposed by divine punishment, but as the consequence of what it has sown in life. The justice of the afterlife, according to what Ayre saw, is not arbitrary nor immediate. It is profound, pedagogical, spiritual. The souls that descended into the underworld later spoke, upon their return, of the terrifying visions they had seen, tyrants being torn apart, murderers confronting their victims, empty souls sunk in the torment of eternal remorse. These were not external punishments, but a form of confrontation with truth. In contrast, those who came from heaven described serenity, pure joy, the harmony of having lived according to virtue. But even they, like all souls, had to prepare to live again, to choose a new existence. Then understood that the soul is immortal, and that its journey does not end with physical death. In his account, there is no fear of hell, nor promises of paradise. What exists is responsibility. Each soul is the architect of its own destiny, and life is only one stage in an eternal cycle of learning, of falling and rising, of forgetting and gaining wisdom. Ayre's return, this conscious rebirth, raises a profound question. If the soul is eternal, what is the meaning of this present life? The answer that emerges from the myth is clear. Life is the testing ground, the decisive moment in which each soul, in freedom, builds its spiritual future. To live is not merely to exist, but to shape the soul for its eternal journey. Ayre returned to the world of the living to recount what he had seen. And although many listened with skepticism or fear, his story was preserved by Plato as a philosophical revelation. It is not a myth for entertainment, but a guide to awakening. Its message is not for the dead, but for the living. For as long as we are alive, we are still free. We can still choose. Ear's testimony opens a portal, not to any particular religion, but to a higher understanding of the soul, of freedom, and of the moral order of the universe. What he witnessed reflects a truth that does not belong to one culture or time, but to the heart of the human experience. We are souls in transit, and this present life is but a stretch of the journey. Saw it, and that is why he returned. Journey into the beyond led him to a majestic and terrifying vision, the judgment of souls. It was not a human tribunal, nor a simplistic allegory of punishment. It was a profound revelation of how spiritual truth weighs upon every existence. There, at the invisible threshold between the earthly and the eternal, saw each soul stand before invisible yet just judges. They had no flesh or face, but their authority was unquestionable, and their verdict could not be evaded. In that place there were no lawyers or external witnesses. Each soul appeared naked, stripped of everything that had defined it in the material world. Social rank, accumulated wealth, fame, power, or ignorance, none of it followed the soul to judgment. Only its inner life remained. Its actions, intentions, and deepest truth became visible, like a light or shadow that entirely enveloped the soul. The judges pointed each soul toward its path with serene gestures. To the right ascended those who had lived with justice, temperance, and virtue. To the left descended those who had acted with wickedness, violence, deceit, or cruelty. It was not an automatic punishment, but a natural consequence. The spiritual law witnessed needed no threats. It fulfilled itself, like a moral gravity that drew each soul toward its rightful destiny. In this judgment, it was not merely the external acts that were weighed, but the intention behind every decision. Those who acted justly, not out of calculation, but from conviction, those who cultivated the soul beyond appearances, ascended with a serene radiance. In contrast, those who lived for themselves, without regard for the common good, without respect for the souls of others, were drawn into the depths of the earth, not by the wrath of a god, but by the weight of their own darkness. Then saw something even more revealing, the souls that returned from these two paths. Those who descended into the underworld remained there for 1,000 years, in a time that was not chronological, but spiritual. Each torment was proportional to the harm they had caused. But this punishment was not eternal, it was a form of purification. The soul had to understand, to suffer what it had made others suffer, to internalize the justice of the universe. After 1,000 years they could return, having understood, having changed. The souls who had ascended to heaven also returned after that same period, not to be punished but to choose again. Because in this spiritual system nothing is static, everything is movement, cycle, continuous learning. Retribution is real, but so is freedom. The soul is not condemned to repeat its story. It can transform, it can choose better, it can awaken. The most striking thing witnessed was that not all souls learned. Some, even after 1,000 years of joy or suffering, still failed to understand the true value of virtue. When choosing their next life, they did so carelessly, with vanity or desperation. The deepest lesson of the judgment was not merely about punishment or reward, but about what the soul did with that experience. Some learned, others did not. Wisdom was not automatic. The soul had to desire it. By observing these judgments, understood that divine justice is not vengeance. It is a pedagogy of the soul. It is not imposed by force, but revealed through experience, through spiritual memory, through conscience. Retribution is not an external act. It is an internal illumination. Each soul, seeing itself, understands what it has done and bears it as an indelible mark. The image of judgment conveyed by myth is not meant to inspire fear, but responsibility. It is not a closed system of rewards and punishments, but a web of cause and effect, in which the soul reaps what it has sown. Punishment is not an eternal hell, but an experience designed to transform. Reward is not a fixed paradise, but a state of the soul that propels it upward. From this perspective, human life takes on a higher meaning. It is not merely a brief passage between birth and death, but a decisive stage in the shaping of the soul. Every decision, no matter how small, molds the inner substance of our being. To live justly, to seek truth, to cultivate compassion, these are not ornamental virtues, they are spiritual steps toward freedom. The judgment of souls, as Eyre saw it, is the great mirror of the human soul. It is not about fearing a punishing God, but about seeing clearly who we are at our core, what the soul chooses when no one is watching, what remains when all externals are stripped away, what shines or darkens according to the life we've lived. That is what is judged. And yet, even after judgment, there is hope. Even souls that have erred can understand, can change, can return to the path. The justice of the afterlife is not a trap or a condemnation. It is a guide. An architecture of meaning built so that every soul, sooner or later, may discover its true nature. Er was not judged, but he saw. And that was enough to transform him. He returned to the world not to live an ordinary life, but to deliver a message. The soul is immortal, and its destiny lies in our hands. Judgment awaits us all, not with violence, but with truth. And only those who have loved the truth will be able to face it without fear. Er's journey was not a simple linear passage between life and death. It was a descent into the mystery of the soul, into the depths of being and the heights of spirit. In the vision granted to him, the concepts of heaven and hell were not static places, but states of the soul, stages within a greater process and eternal learning. What Er beheld was a moral order of the universe, where existence does not end with death, but is transformed, refined, and begins again. In his account, the souls judged as just embarked on a path toward heaven. They ascended to the right, light, serene, infused with a radiance that was not physical but spiritual. Observed how these souls vanished into the heights and remained there for 1,000 years. But this celestial stay was not a mere reward. It was not an empty prize or a passive rest. It was a time of contemplation, of the internalization of virtue, of peace with truth. In this elevated state, the souls could experience the harmonious echo of their just lives. They were no longer subject to desire, to fear, or to error. They had traversed life with wisdom, and in heaven, that wisdom resonated like a perfect melody. But even there, they were not exempt from the cycle. After that spiritual millennium, they too had to return. No one remains in the same state forever. Movement is the law of the soul. Everything is transition, evolution, transformation. The unjust souls, on the other hand, descended into the underworld, to the left. There was no fire or external torture, but a process of confrontation and purification. Heard the testimonies of the souls who had returned from that place. They spoke of sufferings proportional to the harm they had caused. These were not arbitrary punishments, but pedagogical experiences. Tyrants were forced to eternally witness the consequences of their actions. Murderers faced their victims. The unjust lived under the oppression they had once inflicted. This hell was not eternal, but regenerative. A millennium of darkness not meant to condemn, but to transform. A punishment that contained within it the seed of redemption. These souls were not abandoned. They were enveloped by a spiritual law that sought, even through pain, awakening. There is no destruction of the soul in this system, but purification. And that is only possible because the soul is immortal, because it has a destiny greater than its fall. I watched this 1,000-year cycle attentively. It was not a blind wheel, but a movement guided by justice and freedom. Souls passed through stages of learning and then returned to the same starting point, the meadow where all gather again, where each must choose a new life. No one remains forever in heaven or in hell. What matters is not the place, but what the soul does with what it has experienced. In this spiritual cosmology, the 1,000-year cycle holds symbolic value. It is not merely a chronological figure. It represents the completeness of an experience. 1,000 years as the time necessary to understand, to see, to remember. For the key lies in memory. The soul must remember what it has been, what it has lived, what it has felt. Only then can it wisely choose its next existence. But even after 1,000 years, not all souls choose well. Some return marked by the arrogance of their celestial joy, others by the despair of their torment. Pleasure can blind just as much as pain. And here Plato, through the myth of Eyre, introduces a fundamental spiritual lesson. Freedom does not guarantee wisdom. The soul can choose, but only the soul that has learned, that has remembered, that has awakened, will choose the right path. Thus, heaven is not a final reward, nor hell a definitive sentence. Both are part of a broader process. They are stations on the soul's journey, and that journey is cyclical but not mechanical. It has direction, it has meaning, it has purpose. It is a path toward the true understanding of virtue, of truth, of the good. Was witness to that deep law which governs life beyond death. He saw that souls were not forgotten creatures or toys of chance. Each one carried within itself the seed of its destiny. What they had sown in life they reaped afterward, not by external imposition, but by the law of the soul, a law that does not punish but reveals. This millennial cycle is not an eternal condemnation, but a constant opportunity for redemption. Even the most fallen souls, after their time in the underworld, can return with a thirst for wisdom, with a desire for virtue, with a hunger for truth. And likewise, the souls who enjoyed heaven can make poor choices and fall. Everything depends on consciousness, on spiritual memory, on deep learning. At this point, the myth of air becomes a universal teaching. It tells us that there is no soul lost forever, nor salvation guaranteed. Everything is in motion, and that movement has meaning because the soul is free, free to err, free to learn, free to change. Justice is not a prison, but a mirror, and freedom its most sacred reflection. Saw heaven, he saw hell. But above all, he understood that what truly matters is not where the soul has been, but what it does with what it has lived. For the true heaven is the wisdom born from experience, and the true hell the forgetting of who we are. After witnessing the paths of heaven and the underworld, became a witness to one of the soul's most transcendent moments, the choice of a new life. It was not a casual act, nor a blind process. It was a sacred rite, a profound decision, in which each soul determined its future with complete freedom. And yet, that freedom was tinged with mystery, responsibility, and risk. For in that choice, the truth of the soul was revealed once again. In a vast luminous meadow, the souls who had completed their 1,000-year cycle returned to prepare for their next incarnation. There they all gathered, without distinction, and before them were laid out the possible lives, like extended models, like open paths. There were lives of kings and beggars, of warriors and sages, of artists, slaves, animals, women, men. Every form of existence was there, awaiting them. But it was not an arbitrary distribution. Each soul had to choose, and the choice was final. No one could later blame fate, the gods, or chance. Each one was the author of their own destiny. Responsibility was absolute. Observed how the lives were presented, arranged like a cosmic fan. But before the choice, a mysterious figure intervened, the goddess Ananke, necessity. Beside her spun the great wheel of the universe, the spindle of necessity, driven by the daughters of the goddess, the three Moirai or fates. Clotho, who spins the beginning, Lachesis, who assigns the present fate, and Atropos, who cuts the thread, marking the end. These weavers of the cosmos did not impose destiny, but unfolded it, held it out for the souls to see. The spiritual vision here is profound. Destiny is not a chain, but neither is it an illusion. It is a field of possibilities revealed beneath the gaze of necessity. The soul is free to choose, but it cannot choose without consequences. Every choice has weight. Every life carries a burden. Necessity does not negate freedom. It gives it form. It gives it seriousness. I saw that many souls chose wisely, but others erred. Some, coming from heaven, chose brilliant but dangerous lives because they did not remember suffering. They did not understand what ambition, power, or war entailed. Others, coming from the underworld, chose timid lives out of fear of falling again. Some, in desperation, chose without reflection, drawn by appearances, lives of glory, beauty, or wealth, without considering the consequences. And so, a crucial lesson emerged from the account. True spiritual freedom requires knowledge. It requires memory. Only those who remember what they have lived can choose wisely. That is why forgetting, spiritual amnesia, is the soul's greatest danger. Without memory, freedom becomes a trap, the choice becomes superficial, and the soul falls once more. I saw one soul who had lived in heaven for 1,000 years and, dazzled by fame, chose the life of a tyrant. Another who had endured deep suffering chose the existence of a docile animal fleeing from conflict. The contrast was painful. But he also saw souls who had understood, souls who, with serenity, chose just, moderate, balanced lives. Not the most dazzling, but the ones that favoured the soul's growth. In this act of choosing, the myth reveals a profound spiritual vision. Each soul is the architect of its path. There is no absolute predestination, but neither is there freedom without responsibility. The life one lives is not simply a gift or a condemnation, it is a reflection of past choices, and the future life will depend on the wisdom with which one chooses now. The Moirai, who seemed to weave destiny, did not interfere. They simply watched. Ananke turned her wheel, marking the rhythm of the cosmos. But the soul was the one who decided. The universe does not impose, it offers. The soul does not suffer, it learns. Every incarnation is a school, a laboratory of the soul, one more step in the journey toward wisdom. At this point, the myth of becomes an ethical revelation of immense power. It invites us to see life not as an accident, nor as a straight line, but as an eternal opportunity. Each human being at birth carries a spiritual history. We are not blank pages. We are souls that choose, that forget, that remember, that fall, that rise. And what defines us is not success or failure, but what we learn and how we choose. The act of choosing a life is a sacred act. It is not an automatic right, but a spiritual responsibility. To choose an existence is not just to decide on a body or a place, but to accept a destiny, a mission, a set of challenges that will help us grow. Every life has its burden, its beauty, its darkness, its lesson. At the end of this stage, once the life was chosen, each soul drank from the river Leith, the river of forgetting. And that, perhaps, was the most tragic part. The soul forgot its choice, its story, its judgment, its purpose. It was born as if for the first time, and yet deep within a trace remained, a nostalgia, an echo. The soul did not remember in words, but in intuition. That is why some people seek truth, justice, love, without knowing why, because their soul has already lived it, and it is remembering. Did not drink from the river, he was sent back to tell what he had seen, so that we, the living, might know, so that we might not choose in ignorance. So that, as we live this life, we might remember that every act, every decision, every thought shapes our soul, that the life we now live was chosen, and that what we do with it will determine the next. After the choice, once the souls had selected the lives that would be theirs, they approached the river of forgetfulness, Leith. This river was not merely a mythological element, but a profoundly spiritual symbol. Drinking from its waters meant releasing all conscious memory of previous lives, of judgment, of heaven, of hell, of choices and their consequences. It was the veil of forgetfulness that covers each soul at birth, the mystery that prevents us from remembering who we were, what we chose, why we are here. Yet the soul was not left empty. Even though it forgot the details, it retained a spiritual imprint, a deep inclination, an inner resonance. This echo is what Plato and many spiritual traditions recognize as moral intuition, vocation, the unrest of the soul that searches for something more, that knows without knowing why. It is the longing we feel for truth, beauty, justice, and love. These are the fragments of spiritual memory that resonate deep within us. The souls, after drinking from Leith, were propelled toward their new birth like shooting stars. I saw how they were launched toward the earthly world, toward new bodies, new homes, new times. Each soul carried within it the seed of what it had lived and what it had chosen, even if it forgot it at birth. And thus the cycle of life began again, not as an absurd repetition, but as a new opportunity. At this point, the myth presents us with a profound spiritual teaching. Every life we live is the result of a decision made by our soul on another plane. Nothing is random. We are not victims of unjust fate, nor puppets of chaos. We are souls who have chosen, who have forgotten, but who can remember with the heart. And this life we now live is our school, our opportunity, our path back to wisdom. Er's return to life is in itself a miracle. Unlike the other souls, he did not drink from Leith. He did not forget. He was sent back to the world of the living to tell what he had seen. And that message, beyond the story itself, is a call to consciousness, a warning and a hope. Plato, through does not offer us a closed doctrine, but an invitation to live as if our decisions carried eternal weight. Speaks to us from the threshold between life and death. His testimony does not aim to instill fear, but to awaken responsibility. He tells us that our actions do not disappear, that what we do with our freedom has consequences that go beyond death, that the soul is immortal and its destiny depends not on divine favors, but on its own choices. This message is not only for believers or philosophers, it is a universal message, profoundly human. It reminds us that life is not a pastime, nor a punishment, nor a mere material experience. It is a sacred opportunity, Every thought, every decision, every act of love or injustice shapes our being, and that being does not die. It continues, it learns, it returns. But how are we to live with this awareness? How can we remember what the soul has forgotten? Plato suggests that philosophy is the path of the soul that longs to remember. Not academic philosophy, but living philosophy, spiritual, a search for the good, the true, the eternal. To live philosophically in this context means to live with attention, with virtue, with responsibility. It means asking not just what we want, but who we are and what the meaning of our existence is. Ayre's message is not a map, it is a compass. It does not tell us exactly what to do, but it orients us. It reminds us that our soul is at stake, that the life we live now will influence the one to come, that suffering is not punishment but learning, that happiness is not reward but the consequence of a life well lived, and that the greatest treasure is wisdom, for only wisdom enables us to choose well. Each of us is now in the same place those souls stood in the meadow beyond, facing choices. We do not remember where we come from, nor what we chose before, but the decisions we make now are building the future of our soul. That is why every day is sacred. Every moment can be a doorway to redemption or to downfall. The myth of Ayre does not pretend to describe with precision what happens after death. Its purpose is not scientific, but spiritual. It is a mirror for the soul. It shows us that we are more than body, more than memory, more than history. We are travelers of eternity, and the present life is one of the steps of that journey. Ayre returned, and in doing so, he left us his vision as a testament of the soul. His experience was not a dream nor a hallucination, but a revelation, a vision that crosses the centuries and questions us today. What are you doing with your freedom? What are you planting in your soul? What life are you choosing, here and now? The eternal lesson of the soul and the awakening in the present. The myth of Ayre does not end with fireworks or apocalyptic punishments. It concludes rather with a silent yet powerful call to awakening. It is a mirror offered to the human soul, so that it may see its reflection not merely as a passenger in the world, but as the protagonist of a far greater, deeper, and more sacred journey. What is at stake is not social success nor the accumulation of power, but the eternal destiny of the self. Today, more than 2,000 years later, we still face the same essential questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Why do I suffer? Does life have meaning? The myth of Ayre does not offer closed answers, but it does give clear direction. Life is a test, a preparation, and an opportunity to choose consciously. We are not here by accident. We are not here merely to pass the time. We are here to grow spiritually. The central message of this story has not lost its relevance. The soul's freedom is real, but dangerous. Freedom is not about doing whatever one wants, but about choosing well with wisdom. And wisdom does not come easily. It requires effort, reflection, virtue, and above all, a deep interior life. In a world that spins faster each day, where distractions assail us, where success is measured in numbers, and where death is hidden beneath spectacle and consumption, Ayre's voice resounds as a loving warning. It reminds us that no act is without consequence, that our decisions leave invisible marks, that the soul does not forget, even if the mind does. Just as the souls choosing new lives were unaware of the true weight of their decisions due to memory loss, we too, in modern life, risk choosing poorly by not looking within. Spiritual ignorance, the forgetting of our purpose, is the soul's greatest enemy. That is why awakening is urgent. The myth teaches us that suffering is not divine punishment, but the natural result of poor choices, and that true joy is not superficial pleasure, but deep peace, the fruit of a well-lived life. Justice, goodness, temperance, these are not abstract virtues. They are tools for the soul that longs to rise, that longs to choose well, that longs to break the cycle of error and be reborn in greater light. What does this mean for us today? That every moment holds eternal value, that our daily actions, no matter how trivial they may seem, are part of the shaping of our soul, that when we choose to forgive, to serve, to love, to think deeply, we are shaping our eternal destiny. And that when we choose hatred, judgment, envy, or lies, we weaken our deepest self. The human soul in this vision is immortal, not as a possession, but as a task. Immortality is not granted for us to enjoy passively, but to cultivate with responsibility, like a seed that may become a tree or wither. What we do here resonates beyond death. Death, then, is not an end, but a threshold, a return to the truth. And that truth is not condemnation, but opportunity. Because if the soul learns, if it remembers, if it is purified, it can choose better. It can escape the cycle of error and unnecessary suffering. It can draw closer to the harmony of the cosmos, to the rhythm of divine justice, to the eternal center where all things find their place. In that center dwells the good, the beautiful, the true. There lies the ultimate meaning of existence. For Plato, and for many spiritual traditions, to live well is to prepare to die well. And to die well is, ultimately, to have chosen a just life, a noble life oriented toward the soul, a conscious life, an awakened life, a return so that we would not forget, so that we would know that who we are now is the result of ancient decisions, and that who we will become depends on what we choose now. He is the messenger of the soul that has seen beyond and returned to remind us who we truly are. This myth, then, is not a fable, it is a call. It challenges us to live with attention, with reverence, with love, to look beyond the immediate present, to shape the soul as a sculptor shapes his work, with patience, with effort, with vision. Because if the soul is immortal, then every gesture matters. Every choice is part of an eternity we are writing here, minute by minute. The question the myth leaves echoing is not, what is there after death? But what are you doing with your life now? Because there, in that silent answer that only you know, lies the eternal destiny of your soul. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What are you doing with your freedom? What are you planting in your soul? What kind of life are you choosing here and now?